Hello again everybody and welcome to the channel. Now this is the fourth and final video under the memory settings, which you find by pressing the loop button on the RC-600 for the parameter guide. Now if you haven't already checked out the other videos, please click up here somewhere to navigate to other areas that might be of interest with regards to the parameter guide. Now, if you are new here, do consider subscribing to stay in the loop, and if you do find it valuable, then please give it a like so it can reach more people like yourself. Now, in this video, I'm going to run through the options under Rhythm and Name, which you can find on pages 7 and 8 of the RC-600 parameter guide. Now, the parameters under Rhythm give us a range of options to determine how we control and control the different rhythms, drum beats, and patterns within the RC-600, and Name is just a way to rename our memories. So it's fair to say that one of these will be more extensive than the other in terms of how much content I put into this video. Now, to access the final two options, you are going to press Loop, which you'll find there, and you can either press it twice, as I've mentioned in another video, and then it just takes you to the second page, or you can press it the once and then page across by hitting this tab here. So like I've mentioned, we're going to focus on the final two options here. So Rhythm first, and then we'll talk about Name later on. So let's get to it. So if we first hit the Rhythm button here, we push it down, and then we can access the parameters within Rhythm. And I can obviously page across, and you can find further options along there. So let's start on page number 1 with Genre. So the first knob along here is Genre. So this just gives us the option to choose from selecting a different range of genres or styles, depending on what kind of beats you're after. And we have a wide selection to choose from, including acoustic. If I just scroll through here, you can see all of these different options here. So we've got rock, we've got soul, we've got jazz, loads of different styles that we can use. There's quite an extensive range, so check out the parameter guide to see a full list of all of these different genres that you can choose from. So the next one along is pattern. So depending on the genre that you've selected, we've got a range of different patterns within that genre. So if I've got metal selected here, I've got these different patterns within metal. So let's say if I'll choose something different like ballroom, I've got some different patterns within ballroom. So depending on the style that you select, you've then got a few options for different patterns within that style as well. Now, we're not going to listen to any today, but you can see the full list on pages 46 and 47 of the parameter guide. And if you go to John Paul Music UK, he has lots and lots of useful videos on the RC-600, and he's also created a video running through each of the different sounds and rhythms within the RC-600. So I'll leave a link in the description below for you to check that out. And the next one along is variation. We've got variations A, B, C, and D, and they're all going to sound slightly different depending on what genre and what pattern you've selected, but it just gives you another 4 options to change to a slightly different groove within that style. And then the final option on this first page is the kit. So here we can choose a specific kit sound that we want to use for playback, which includes studio, live. You've got lots of different options here, rock. We've got brushes, so you're going to have a slightly different sound depending on which kit that you select. And again, just look over the parameter guide to see the full list of options that you can choose for your kit. Now, if I page across here using the arrow key, you can see I've got some more options here. The first one is the beat. So the beat is going to allow us to select whichever time signature we want for our rhythm to play back. So it's set to 4/4 by default, which means that you'll hear 4 beats in each measure before the groove continues to repeat. However, we do have options to change this to a number of different time signatures, including 3/4, we've got 2/4, and then you can even go up to 7/8, whatever you want to do. There's lots of different combinations to change to a different time signature there. It's important to note as well that once you've selected your beat, your time signature, you then can't later change this after you've recorded your first loop to the track. So just make sure that you select your time signature before starting your recordings. So now we've got the start trigger. So basically we can choose from 3 options here. You've got loop start, first of all. So this means that the rhythm will play when the loop recording or the playback of the track begins. And this is the default setting for the start trigger. So what will happen is you'll start your loops, and as soon as you hit record on your first loop, then that means that in this setting the rhythm will start to play back immediately. Now, if I turn this to rec end, so basically what's going to happen then is you're going to hit record on your first loop. The rhythm won't start until that first loop has been recorded, and then you can start to play this one back, hence why it says record end here. So it will be the end of the recording when the rhythm starts. That's also a good option if you want your rhythm to play without first specifying the tempo, although having the rhythm start immediately after recording your first loop might not be something that you want to achieve or want to present within your song. And then the final option for the start trigger is before loop. So you might have guessed it, this option allows you to hear the rhythm first before you start recording your first loop. So when you hit the record play button, what will happen is you'll hear the rhythm being played back, and then you won't start to record until you hit that record button again. So let me give you some examples with the start trig here. So I've gone back to loop start and I've armed the rhythm, so you can see that flashing over there. Now if I hit this first record button here, you can see that rhythm light is solid, and that means the rhythm is being played back when I'm recording, and then I hit it again and I can play back whatever I've recorded along with the rhythm. So now I've switched to record end, and you can see the rhythm is still armed. When I hit the record button now, the rhythm's going to continue to flash because it's not being played back as I'm recording, but when I play back this track, you'll see the rhythm will go solid, and that means the rhythm will be playing back with the track, as so. And then finally, I've just changed it to before loop. So again, we are armed here. You can see the rhythm's flashing. I'm going to hit the record button. The rhythm goes solid, which means that the rhythm is being played before the recording starts, but we've got quite a fast flash here and over here. So that means that nothing is being recorded until I hit this button a second time. And there we go. And then next up, we've got the stop trig. So it was set to loop stop by default, but we have 3 different options. So I can turn my stop trigger off, and this just means that my rhythm will continue to play and I won't be able to turn it off. And then the loop stop one, this just means that the rhythm will stop playing when the loop ends, or when I press stop on the loop. And then I've got an option to stop it as well at the end of the recording. So this option allows you to have the rhythm stop playing when the first recorded loop ends, and it states this in the parameter guide as well. So this could be useful if you wanted to use the rhythm as a guide, perhaps to assist you when you're recording your initial loop. So you could even set the rhythm as a click track for this option, and then route this to your in-ear monitors if you were using those. So the audience wouldn't necessarily hear your click being played back, but you could hear it during your first loop being recorded, just to help you stay in time. And then when you play that back, the click will stop, and then you've got your first loop, hopefully, in time. And then the final option on this second page is intro record. Now it is off by default, so you can turn it on by using this right hand knob here. So let's say you want to turn it on before recording your first loop. This will determine whether you hear an intro before recording onto that particular track. So if you hit the record button and you've armed your rhythm, you'll hit that record button, you'll hear an intro. You can see that the lights were flashing solid. I'll just do that one more time so you can see that again. So I'll hit this button here and you will hear an intro happen before your recording starts. So this could be another creative option that you've got, perhaps something that you'd like to use as a count-in before recording takes place to that track. So if I page across one final time, this takes us to the third and final page of our rhythm settings, and you can see I've got an option here on the left hand side for intro play. So this is going to be similar to intro record. However, you're not going to hear an intro when you record, well, unless you've got your intro record on. But let's say I've got intro record off and I've got intro play on. What that means is I'm going to hit the record button and you're going to not hear the intro as I record, so you won't see any solid red lights when I do this now. And then I'll play that back. So let's say I've stopped that loop. Now what will happen, because I've got intro play on, is that when I play this back now, you'll see it's going to flash green, and that means there's an intro playing as I'm playing this loop back. So there it was. Of course, you do have the option as well to have intro record on as well. So you could have your intro record on when you record your first loop, and you can also have intro play on, so you can have those intros happening when you're recording and when you're playing your loop back. Next up, we've got ending, which is turned off by default, and you can just turn that on with that knob here. So this is going to select whether or not you want an ending at the end of your rhythm, at the end of your pattern. So if you want your groove to finish with an ending or without. So let's say you do. Depending on whatever groove and pattern you've selected, will have a slightly different ending. But this just gives you the option there to have your ending on or off. And then the fill, this determines whether the rhythm plays a fill or no fill. So obviously we've got fill set to on here. You can turn that off if you don't want to hear a fill in between your variation changes, for example. So if you wanted to change between variations in a particular song, and let's say you're going to go from variation A to variation C in one of your songs, you can put a fill in between. So it depends whether you want your fill to play in between your variations or not. Finally, on the right hand side, we have got the option to have our variation change be to the measure or to loop end. So if we've set to measure, that means that the variation will happen at the end of that particular measure. So that means it will change over to the other variation that you might select at the end or closest to the measure. And then here, if we change to loop end, this means that the variation will take place at the end of the loop, so when it reaches the end of its cycle. Something else worth noting as well, if you save or write your settings whilst the rhythm is either on standby, as it is here, or if it's solid, which means it's on. So if you're saving your settings when it's in one of those two modes there, so either standby or switched on, this just means that your rhythm is ready to go, or it might play straight away when you choose that particular memory. So let's say you want to select this memory and have the rhythm ready to go on standby, then you would just save or you write your settings. Remember, exit and enter together to do that whilst it's on standby, and then it's ready to go for that memory. Or let's say you want to move to this memory and have the rhythm play straight away. That could be useful for you. If you enter and exit together whilst this is solid, that means the rhythm's playing back, and you write to memory there, it just means that when you choose this particular memory, the rhythm is ready to go and it is playing straight away. So that could be useful, let's say if you're switching between memories in the same song. You might be on, say, memory 50 for the verse part of a song, and then you want to go into a different memory with completely new settings and a new kit and have that rhythm being played straight away on 51, then you can write and have your rhythm ready to go on that next memory. Now we'll finally move on to name. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to go to loop and we hit it twice and we can choose name. Now, as I did mention earlier on, there's not really that much to talk about with this one, but we'll cover it anyway, seeing as though we're going through as much of the parameter guide as possible. So by turning the first knob along, you'll see that I can just quickly change from capital letters, lowercase letters, and then I've got numbers, and then I've got symbols and characters I can select there, and that will just keep toggling between each of those. So that's the first knob. And then if I press the knob down, it will delete whichever character I've got in that cursor position. So by turning the second knob along, this will just go from capital letters to lowercase letters depending on where the cursor position is. So you can see I can quickly go to a capital O or a lowercase o, as that's where my cursor is. And then if I was to press the second knob down, it will put a space in the cursor position. So I've got some spaces before the O. Obviously, if I want to move across, which I'll talk about later, I can put the spaces in a different position. Turning the third knob along, this will just change between all of the individual letters, and I can just keep scrolling across. I go across all the way. So I'm just running through everything individually that way by turning the third knob. And just so you're aware, nothing will happen when you push down on the third knob. And then finally, the fourth knob along will just move the cursor wherever I want to position it. So I can obviously quickly go to different letters or numbers depending on what I want to name my memory. And finally, nothing happens when I push down on the fourth knob either. So there we go. As if by magic, the word subscribe has appeared on my screen. Not sure how that's happened. So there we go, everybody. The rhythm and name parameter guide options on the RC-600. Next up in the series, I'm going to begin running through the system settings, which you will find under the menu button this time. So we're all done with loop. We're going to talk about the menu button and run through the system settings, kicking off with the input options. So stay tuned for that one. If there is anything else that you'd like to check out or think that you might have missed, click on the playlist on screen to check out other videos in this series. And as always, if you found it useful, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel to stay in the loop, and you can support the channel through the various links below. And as always, everybody, I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta!